tonight. I know Glenn, you met yesterday with an applicant that is still working to get a complete application. In front of the board, so that is still.
I'm sorry, pending.
So we don't have any applications here tonight. We have one set of meeting minutes here, I believe we're up to date on this. I think that's true. And then, otherwise, we received this week, about the information from Kathy about the capital improvements program being under the review of the planning board and needing to be updated. Gonna give an update.
That's it?
That's it.
No. I included, packets for everyone. Basically, the RSA information about capital improvement programs. Stating basically it's not just a wish list, it's the full, capital expenditure estimate we're going forward for the next 6 years. And then this will have to be updated every year.
Every year?
Every year. It goes over every year, it goes over, you spend one more year.
What's the 6 year? The schedule itself is for 6 years, but you update it every year because things drop out of the program. And the year that you're in, it's just whatever is listed for that year, and you move on to the next year. Now, I'm gonna tell you, it's not a bad thing for any community to do a CIP. The reason most communities do a CIP is because it's statutorily required if you assess impact. Or if you do a growth management. Either of which this town does. So from the perspective of the document has, that's why it's under the purview of the planning board, because of that connection to those two ordinances. We have neither of those.
Police chief believes that we need to get funds to deal with farm, the other school, we've got these two
Right,
schools.
he wants.
These two. schools.
Yeah. Well, I think money should come from the schools.
Well, that's not capital improvements, is it? Well, it depends on what he's saying he needs.
Right.
Okay.
You're just saying money.
I mean, well, for towns that assess impact fees, they can generate a lot of funds for a community. Both the towns of Brentwood and Kingston, in my little world, assess impact fees. They raise a lot of money, and because of that impact, the state legislature said about 20 years ago, you can't be doing this without there being some sort of connection to the budgetary process of the town. And so they said you need to have a CIP if you're going to do either of those two kinds of zoning.
And it's very specific ways you can use that money too. I mean,
For investments, it's very specific.
I guess
Yes.
where I want to put our town, yeah.
So from my perspective, it's never a bad thing to have a CIP because one of the benefits of the CIP is to understand for some sort of planning horizon, and according to state law, it's 6 years for CIPs and the answer. You are looking at budgetary considerations for capital improvements with an eye towards making sure they don't all happen in one year. That you're planning for them, that you're putting some out like far reach of the 6 years, and some are more immediate, you have the upfront years, but the basic benefit is that you know what all your capital expenditures are community wide, and you can program them over 6 years, so there's no single year where you're stuck with $900,000 worth of capital improvements.
So we're not delinquent in this because we don't assess impact fees, so we don't technically have to have CIP.
Yeah, the CIP is the advisory document.
Okay, I just looked at 2012 data, I'm like, oh, this hasn't been done in a little bit.
I think that there was a time the town had road management.
Yeah.
Where they tried to limit building permits. And if you limit building permits in any way, or you would be statutorily, illegal.
If you have one, do you have to follow the regulations as far as updating it? Or if you don't require it, does it just not apply to
If you
you?
don't, if you're not doing one of those ordinances, it's an advisory document, you don't need to do it.
So-
But if you do, if the state law says that the planning board prepares and then provides to typically the board of selectmen in the budget. We're not a budget committee act now, we don't have a budget. So it just is an advisory document to the board of selectmen as they prepare the budget.
So what I'm asking is if, it says you're supposed to update it every, 6 years, rolling like.
Yeah.
The fact that we're not required to do it, that's,
She's asking if we
No
still,
one would, you could decide internally that you're going to look at your field every 2 years. Or even every 3 years, halfway through the process. Because it isn't statutorily required, and it's only advised.
so,
The CIP, the city, meaning capital, that has to be strictly adhered to, right? It can't be that the end of the movie. His funds.
Correct, the definition of a capital project is one that is purchased for greater than typically 5 years. So it's not recurring in short-term basis. It's only for capital expenditure, not any operation. So it discounts police officers, hiring police officers, or getting greater staffing levels at the town hall for anything, or even greater staffing levels at the library. Because typically the agency that most use this are the police department, fire department, the library, and schools. They're the typical users of impact funds, which is the reason that in the CIP.
So-
Like the complex that they're thinking about for the town building, town complex,
Yeah, actually,
that would have to be a capital.
that's the biggest thing that, I would almost CIPs is either a new town hall, a new safety complex, or something in between.
so where we stand with the capital improvement program document right now, Kathy is working to kind of gather the needs from all the different groups, and we'll wait to hear our information. So we don't have an immediate action item, but it has been brought to the attention of the planning board that this is something we should be.
Right now, I'm absolutely happy to work with Kathy, on the project that it does. A CIP eventually has to be adopted first by the planning board and then given as an advisory document to the board of selectmen. But there isn't even a description, as to what that adoption means. You don't have to do it in a public hearing, like you do with most things. You can literally just show up on an agenda, say, this is the compiled CIP, the planning board endorses it, sends it along as an advisory document to the board of selectmen.
Thanks. All right, any other questions on that for tonight? Hearing none, the short-term rental zoning regs.
This was paid specifically a planning board, but I wanted the planning board to be aware of some new regulations coming down from the state concerning short-term rentals, how things are being described and placed upon in towns. So it's just to get yourself familiar with this information. Because it could come through zoning with the, after the zoning hearing, this may be referenced, and we just need to be sure that the planning board is aware of it and don't miss there.
is there anything in here that says we have to have a regulation about them?
Oh, the importance of this document is the state legislature has failed in several attempts to come up with some sort of state law dealing with short-term rentals.
So that hasn't changed.
So the Supreme Court has given a really odd decision that makes it seem like they believe, or the Supreme Court believes, you need to either allow these or disallow them specifically in your zoning ordinance. And so for most towns, Kensington included, our zoning ordinance is based upon the premise that it's a permissive ordinance, which means the ordinance tells you what's permitted, and if it is not distinctly permitted, then it's prohibited.
Huh?
And this is saying you can't do that in short-term rental. You need to say somewhere in the ordinance that it is not permitted, or it is permitted. Which just completely is the Supreme Court stepping in and telling almost every town in the state, you're doing things all wrong. Much the way they've said now with multifamily housing and accessory apartments. They're completely out of their league. And it was just the legislature, now it's the legislature and the Supreme Court. So they give a couple of ways that this article gives a couple of ways that the town can clarify their feelings about short-term rental. So board members read this and we should talk about it, because it would require a zoning change. And we're in that period. It follows when we talk about these things, so
And
it would be good to do.
last year we did discuss briefly whether or not we wanted to entertain a warrant article about limiting short-term rentals, but we didn't ultimately pursue it. I think the feeling at that time was that we hadn't seen enough of it as a problem.
Well, I think it's
And
good.
that we have this
Yeah.
ordinance that we really said, no, you can't do it. And now we're being told that is the case.
Do you think our ordinance prohibits passing this? I think our ordinance prohibits short-term rentals.
Yeah, it's in the residential zone. We don't say that you can do hotels, in short-term stay facilities.
But we,
So
you can't rent it.
So it would be, you can rent a house as a house. And if you were to rent it every 3 weeks, that was your desired goal, I don't think anybody would argue with it. You could, why would you do that? But you could.
It's not uncommon that there would be regulations against it. Cities have started picking it up where they want to maintain.
This Supreme Court statement said that these people who have a travel trailer on their property could rent it as a short-term rental.
Oh, I do that about the trailer, I saw that.
But that's what this is actually, that's what this is saying. But otherwise, we have zoning ordinances, and our zoning ordinance tell you what is permitted and what isn't. And our permissive structure says it isn't specifically outlined. We have another process in town that says if you're not either prohibited or permitted, you can go for special exception with the CBA, which is a perfectly fine way to do it. If you want to just say that's how we deal with short-term rentals. But for someone to come into Kensington and say, I just want to do short-term rentals on my residential lot, I would say you can't do it until it's.
So where does it say or why we use that, that we would say it's not permitted, it's not invoked, it's not permitted? Well, where do we get the authority to do that? I guess that's,
Because the structure of the permissive zoning ordinance is just that,
but where does it say we have a permissive? So I don't know what we.
because our zoning ordinance tells us what the permitted uses in a zone are and what the prohibited uses in a zone. And so if you're not listed in the permitted uses, it's the expectation is it's not allowed to, you shouldn't have to get a variance from the zoning board.
Accepted. Now they say, no.
Yeah, they're saying specifically, you better say more in your ordinance.
Well, I mean, then it would follow that, what about other things too? Right, that's where let's go. Yeah.
That's why this is such an out of the way decision by the Supreme Court.
All right, so we're all gonna do some homework there so that we're prepared and we can discuss whether or not at probably one of our workshops in the fall. warrant articles will come up, we can determine whether or not, we feel as though this is something that we need to put into the regs.
My general guidance for towns has been short-term rentals are popular in areas where there's some reason to stay somewhere for a short time. Like if you have 10,000 lakes in your town and you're a summer community that people flock to spend time in your lakes. Or if you're Portsmouth, where people want to go there all the time. In Portsmouth, the real trouble is the hotel industry. It's not this consistently because it chews into their profit. Towns like Kensington, we're not gonna see a ton of people wanting to do short-term rentals. We're not calling, people aren't coming here, wanting to come here on the weekend to climb mountains because we don't have that. But this makes it much more difficult to ignore.
Yeah.
Because just being allowed to rent places, rent trailers on your property as short-term rental, gets into how cheap will you be renting them for? And now you're bringing in folks that might be trying to establish residency somehow. It gets very cloudy there.
Well, and I would just question, like, obviously, not necessarily a big tourist destination, but we have very close proximity to Exeter and Exeter Prep, which has a very high boarding population, and I could see that being, an easy way to rent out your property short term during parents' weekend or graduation. Families that are looking to come in from out of country or out of state for those,
Don't always parents your clients, that nothing is by us.
they're struggling to do that because there aren't as many available properties. Parents like have conversations at bars with like parents being like, I just don't understand why I can't see a house here.
I wish that was my existence.
Yeah.
I just think Gino was telling me Seabrook.
Yeah.
After the seaside part of Seabrook allows short-term rentals, obviously to the beach.
Yeah.
But in town, they're prohibited. And their ordinance was written that way, that there's a line drawn in the sand, if you will, that anything that is to the east or towards the beach is permissible from the one street over. And if you go the other way, it's not permitted. So they've written their ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, I picked on Portsmouth because they've been battling with short-term shit for a long time. All of the beach communities in New Hampshire have been dealing with this. Because they do meet that criteria. Why would people come visit your town for a short time? If you're on the ocean, that's exactly. But they're not coming here to visit our park, even though our park is beautiful. They're it's trying to. Get something.
All right, so we'll continue to do our homework there. The only other thing on the docket for tonight is approval of the meeting minutes from. Start off there. I'm looking at item number 5, approval of the minutes. And it said to add the July 2nd minutes to the next meeting package for board approval. I just want to confirm, we reviewed the July 2nd?
That's all we're doing is review them.
We haven't.
Because I actually have a few changes, questions.
Yeah.
And I thought they were going to come back and change them.
No, aren't those the change you gave me last time? Those were going for July 2nd.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were.
Well, they're not, I don't.
We haven't voted.
No, they're not online, I don't know where they are, I didn't. We've changed.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so we're gonna table the July 2nd minutes again. If we could just add those next month and we'll look at them.
Can I have a question about them though, before we go?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's sort of a general question, but it came up to me on this. When I first started taking minutes, I was told, if you have a waiver, you need to be very specific about, obviously the waiver. But, who made the motion, who seconded the motion, and obviously passed. Is that not true?
No, it's a motion of the board, so all of those things that you just said are required.
Okay, because that was one of my questions. It's not on here. If it's on here that the waivers approved, they have to go to the team. But not who made, and, I mean, I don't know, lots of times we don't necessarily, I think usually we have to do is that,
You absolutely.
you know, who made, blah, 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 blah.
So we might need to go back to the recording.
Yeah. Anyway, I just want to clear that.
Waiver is absolutely a whole by the board, so. He needs to know who made the motion, the second, and that it was voted on, not over there, should be reflected in it.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the July 16th meeting? Anyone willing to make a motion about the meeting?
Does everybody have read them? I mean,
I'll make a motion
We have three, I mean, you're allowed to vote on minutes if you feel comfortable, even though you weren't here, you're not.
and I'm sorry, I'm not a big,
Yeah, okay, we're gonna roll that back.
sorry. I said earlier that I didn't think I wanted to bring it in.
Post meeting, yeah.
It is a post-meeting discussion. However,
So mine doesn't,
if this is maybe the one I just printed tonight, I actually had 2 copies.
The first ones I sent out in the email. I quoted afterwards and took it off.
Well, my question is, if in fact nothing changed, then I guess we want to take that off. So are you saying that you did take it off? Is that what this other? So this must have been, I must have printed this right after the meeting.
It was the first email I sent out with it, that has an agenda. It's
So this one is in page 4 is the actual. All right, just gonna do this. I'm sorry, go ahead with it.
the original one I sent out. Justin and I had a discussion about the merger document that it was set up incorrectly, so that we probably need to change the merger documents and get it re-signed. And then the next day when Bruce Silly came in, he talked about it and he was fine with the way it was. Justin Baldwin said he's fine with the way it is, just, we're just gonna get the deed registered, the merger document registered the way it was. And everything was all about that clock A that was on there, whether it should have been part of the merger document. So yeah, I just took all the discussion that Justin and I had off the meeting because it didn't happen during the meeting. So it didn't have to be recorded.
all right, so we have Mary, motion, we have Aaron,
Make a motion, I second.
seconded, all in favor of approving the meeting minutes.
Aye.
That's 4. or 3?
Yeah.
So that's 4, so we approved the meeting minutes from Wednesday, July 16th.
So it's 4 and 1 exception.
So Dan abstains since he was not present. Does anyone have any new business that they would like to, anything else that they'd like to bring before the board tonight?
I want to raise something real quick. So there was a new statute passed with very little consideration and poorly worded. But one interpretation of it, which has been adopted by town council, is that someone sitting on both the zoning and planning board may not vote on the same as our council, at least reads it, the same project on both boards. Whatever the, whatever my qualms might be with it, town council simply said, that's the interpretation I'm going with, certainly. Therefore, so, want to let everyone know, at this point, I think it probably does not make sense when my term is up on this board to re-up, because one, anything that would go in front of both boards, I just abstain from this board anyways, based on this interpretation, and 2, I don't want it to be the case that something comes up for this board, I vote on it, but there's nothing presently for zoning. And then they later, let's say they subdivide here, and then 3 months later, they bring something to zoning, and then there's questions of is it the same project, how related, it's just a mess. And so I think my plan, just so everyone knows, is whenever my term's up here, whenever it is, I don't think I will, so all of you know, and, for purposes of finding somebody else to.
But if you want to stay planning board. If they don't meet it, don't put, only gets to meet once a month.
Well,
They suckered him into being the chair on that.
Well, that's just for you.
uh,
Here,
well, for now, it's.
aren't you?
So are you able to dig into when the terms are
Yeah.
up,
I think I have.
so that we
Yeah,
can?
usually the county board.
I can give them.
No, it's not urgent. I think we should just.
I think mine.
Okay, anything else for tonight?
You're not going
I'm sure.
that was the question. I was trying to mind.
A statement.
Oh,
Trying to mind control. It didn't seem to work, but that was the attempt.
one part of my decision would be, who's like,
Oh, so me leaving probably counts.
well.
All right, with that being said, I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting until our next regularly scheduled session.
Can I just ask, when do we do, start workshops, is in September or October?
I thought it was September.
I thought it was.
I'm seeing September 17th as our next regular meeting. Let me check there.
His first is very long. It's later, it's in October.
And it's always tricky with.
Maybe it is the first, so maybe it's third.
Yeah, so there is a workshop scheduled on September 3rd. At 6:30. And that will just be a workshop. I'll have to talk to Justin. I won't be in attendance.
Okay. Well, that's so, I'm not, I'm sorry, I keep asking.
Yes, no.
You sent out the minutes of, the zoning board meeting, I had actually already read them. Where are we as far as that goes? That's what they.
With the next hearing, we were using on a complete application.
We met with the engineer yesterday. Justin, Len, the engineer, and went through some full notes from the original submittal. And they are going to prepare a full package and they're planning on getting on September 17th. Agenda, if they get their package in 21 days or by.
They were also planning on being on the agenda last month, so.
However, they have to wait on state, they have the DOT to traffic study and.
So they have to have that before we.
Yes, so she was very cautious that they would not be on it, really in September, so. She said maybe September 2026.
Was anybody, well, I shouldn't say anything because it's already going back to that. I just, when I read the minutes, I was surprised at that.
Private,
Approved.
there's a town that's pretty, not town. Farms, pretty, what's that?
I guess mostly because of. I think traffic's gonna be there. Obviously, it's,
Well, so technically that part is not the purview of.
well, I read that,
Yeah.
I didn't know, does that mean they couldn't have denied it for that?
Well,
Because technically that's up to us.
the other big thing is that, we have in there, I don't know if there's.
I'm sorry, we shouldn't really talk. about it.
You really should.
Okay, sorry.
You can talk with Aaron.
Let's adjourn. All right, I make a motion to adjourn.
So,
All in favor? Unanimous vote.
You two, you don't have a drink.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
there's a condition for any.
I didn't get that, yeah.
So I think that's the.
I guess what I,
That's the correct.
yeah, one of the things that I was surprised at is that I don't, that